It started with a smile. Not mine, hers. The kind that stretches too wide, hides too much. The kind that whispers secrets behind a sip of wine at the dinner table. They say betrayal doesn't announce itself. It wears your sister's perfume, borrows your lipstick, and calls your husband uncle in front of everyone. But on that night, under the soft hum of Christmas lights and the scent of cinnamon ham, I felt something else. Not joy. Not family. It was the gut-wrenching twist of knowing the person you trusted most had turned your life into a theater of lies. And the worst part? The audience applauded. They say the most dangerous enemy is the one wearing a familiar face. I had to lose everything to learn that lesson when a simple family dinner turned into a stage play, and I was the only fool who hadn't been given the script. I still remember the exact moment my world shattered. It wasn't when I found the text messages, it wasn't. Even when I saw them together in that parking lot, his hand lingering too long on her lower back. No. It was when I noticed my niece's hand, unconsciously resting on her stomach during Sunday dinner. The same protective gesture I'd been practicing in private for weeks. You see, I was 8 weeks pregnant, and in that moment, watching my niece's identical movement, I just knew they say when you're drowning your life flashes before your eyes. But when you're betrayed, it's a slow, aching suffocation. You're wide awake, watching every familiar face morph into strangers, every moment stretch into an eternity where trust crumbles right in front of you. My heart didn't just break, it splintered. Silently and irreparably. What they don't tell you is that betrayal feels exactly the same way, sitting there at my brother and sister-in-law's dining table. The voices around me faded into a distant hum. My husband, Ethan, was telling some work story that had everyone laughing. My niece, Zoe, was nodding along, that perfect smile on her face. And my sister-in-law was looking between them, expression with this strange, knowing expression. Are you okay, sweetie? My brother's voice pulled me back. You've barely touched your food. All eyes turned to me, including theirs. Ethan's concerned face, my niece's. Suddenly rigid posture. I'm fine, I managed to say, just feeling a little nauseous lately. Ethan squeezed my hand under the table. We should probably tell them, he said with a smile that once made my heart race. We're expecting. The cheers erupted. My sister-in-law clasped her hands together in delight. My brother stood to hug me, but I couldn't take my eyes off my niece. The color had drained from her face completely. Emma, aren't you happy for your aunt? My sister-in-law prompted, noticing her silence. Zoe's smile was brittle. Of course, I am. It's wonderful news. The way she avoided my eyes, the way her hands still hovered protectively over her own abdomen. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, and slid down against it. My body felt like it was folding inward, too heavy with shock to even cry at first. I sat there frozen, my chest hollow, as if every beat of my heart was pushing me further into the realization I never wanted to face. My hands were shaking so badly. I could barely pull up the text message thread I discovered last week, but had been too terrified to fully read. I scrolled up past the recent mundane exchanges to 3 months back. Ethan, we need to talk about what happened. Nothing to talk about. It was a mistake. Ethan, 3 times isn't a mistake. I pressed my fist against my mouth to keep from screaming 3 times. While I was at that environmental summit in Vancouver, in our bed, probably the bed where we'd been trying for a baby for 2 years. More scrolling revealed everything. The affair had started 6 months ago, around the time Ethan had started working late, around the time Zoe had suddenly become more involved in our lives again after years of distance. Her sudden reappearance, I'd once mistaken for family reconnection, now felt calculated. Every dinner invitation, every shared laugh, rewrote itself in my memory like a cruel parody. But there was worse to come, so much worse. Mom almost caught me leaving your house yesterday. What did you tell her? That I was dropping off some documents. I don't think she believed me. And then from just 8 weeks ago, I'm late. Are you sure? 2 weeks. This can't be happening. Take a test. Now it's positive. I'm pregnant. What are we going to do? I couldn't breathe. The bathroom walls were closing in. My niece was pregnant with my husband's baby. At the same time, I was finally pregnant after years of trying, of hormone shots, of surgeries and disappointments. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was desecration. Every injection, every tear I had shed in the sterile glow of fertility clinics now stood mocked by their reckless intimacy. It felt like some cosmic joke, the cruelest kind, and I was the punchline. I clutched my stomach, silently apologizing to the life inside me for the storm. I was about to bring us into a knock on the door, startled. "Me honey, are you okay in there?" My sister-in-law's voice, concerned but somehow off. I wiped my tears, stuffed my phone in my pocket and splashed water on my face. "Coming," I called, my voice surprisingly steady. When I opened the door, my sister-in-law was standing there with an expression I couldn't quite read. Pregnancy hormones. I lied, forcing a smile. She nodded, but her eyes were calculating. "Zoe's not feeling well, either. Must be something going around." As she turned to walk away, she paused. "By the way, your brother and I could use some help with the medical bills from his surgery. I was wondering if you and Ethan might be able to help out this month." And just like that, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The monthly transfers Ethan made to my brother and sister-in-law's account. The hushed phone calls between my sister-in-law and Zoe. The way my sister-in-law always seemed to need just a little help. Whenever I started asking questions about Ethan's late nights, my sister-in-law knew she had known all along, and suddenly every excuse, every whispered conversation, every moment that had once seemed random or innocent fell into horrifying clarity. They weren't just complicit, they were orchestrating it. And I had been the naive puppet dancing on strings I never knew existed that night, lying next to my husband, the father of my child, and my niece's child. I made a decision. I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't break down, I wouldn't give any of them the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. But God, how I wanted to. I wanted to tear down the walls of our bedroom and howl with the ache of betrayal. But instead I swallowed it, buried it deep inside the shell of who I used to be, like folding a knife into velvet, sharp and silent. Every breath became an act of control, every word a calculated choice not to shatter. They wanted to treat me like nothing. Fine. I would become something none of them were prepared for. The following weeks were an exercise in acting. I became the perfect expectant mother, the supportive wife, the excited aunt. I scheduled doctor's appointments and shared ultrasound pictures behind every smile. I rehearsed my lines like a seasoned performer. Every cheerful update, every hand placed lovingly on my growing belly was a layer of armor. I was building my strength and silence. I planned the nursery and discussed names with Ethan, all while I was dying inside each paint color I chose. Each stuffed animal I placed on the shelf was a rebellion in silence. Proof that even amid ruins, I could create something pure. Zoe started avoiding family gatherings, claiming work stress when she did show up. She wore loose clothing and avoided alcohol with excuses about a new health. My sister-in-law ran interference, always steering conversations away. Whenever anyone asked Zoe about her life or future plans, I started paying attention to the things I'd been too blind to see before, like how Ethan's business trips always coincided with Zoe's days off, or how my sister-in-law would call me with some emergency whenever Ethan and I had plans, only for him to receive an urgent work call and disappear for hours. One night in bed, Ethan reached for me, his hand caressing my slightly rounded belly. "You're going to be an amazing mother," he whispered. "Our baby is so lucky." I wanted to vomit. Instead, I smiled in the darkness and asked, "Do you think Zoe will ever have kids?" His hand froze momentarily on my stomach. "I don't know. She's never seemed the maternal type. Really, I always thought she'd make a wonderful mother." I rolled toward him, watching his face carefully in the dim light. "She's always been so jealous of what I have." A flash of something, guilt, fear crossed his features before he composed himself. "You've always had the stable life she wanted." "That's true, stable," I laughed softly. "Is that what we have, Ethan?" He pulled me closer. "We have everything, babe. Everything anyone could want." I felt his arms tighten around me, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe this was all some terrible dream, but even in his embrace, I was utterly alone. The next day, I accidentally left my prenatal vitamins at my brother and sister-in-law's house. When I went to retrieve them, I arrived early using the key they'd given us years ago. I wasn't surprised to find Ethan's car parked 2 blocks away. The voices from the kitchen confirmed what I already knew. You need to tell her my niece was saying, and say what exactly. Ethan's voice was tense and low. Sorry, honey, but I got your aunt pregnant. While you were finally expecting our miracle baby, this is getting impossible to hide. Zoe hissed, I'm starting to show your mom's handling it. My husband replied, she's got that story about you. Taking a job overseas, you'll be gone before anyone notices, have the baby, and figure out what to do. Next, my sister-in-law's voice joined in. The transfer from Ethan cleared. Yesterday I found a nice place in Arizona where you can stay. No one will know you there. And what about my baby? Zoe asked, her voice breaking. Our baby. Ethan said, well, figure it out, but his tone lacked conviction. Maybe, after some time passes, we can say you're letting us adopt my own child. Zoe's voice rose. Keep your voice down, my sister-in-law snapped. This arrangement works for everyone, Ethan, and you know who keep their perfect life. You get a fresh start with enough money to be comfortable, and your uncle and I can finally pay off our debts. Everyone wins, everyone, except this baby who will grow up thinking their aunt is their mother. Zoe's bitter laugh cut through me. And what about her? She asked, her voice cracking. Does she win in this scenario? What she doesn't know won't hurt her. My sister-in-law said coldly, she's always had everything handed to her, the good grades, the college scholarship, the perfect husband she can share for once. Share, that word sliced through me like a blade. Share the man I built a life with, the man I trusted with my dreams, my body, my future. How casually they spoke. Like my marriage, my motherhood, my identity were just pieces on their chessboard. I backed away silently, my hand covering my mouth to stifle any sound. Share my husband, my life, the father of my child. I'd given everything to this family. When Zoe dropped out of college, I helped pay her rent. When my sister-in-law and brother fell behind on their mortgage, Ethan, and I covered it for 6 months when my brother needed heart surgery. We paid the portion insurance wouldn't cover, and this was how they repaid me, planning to ship my niece off to Arizona to have my husband's baby in secret. While I raised our child none the wiser, the air in my lungs felt thick, poisoned by the betrayal. My chest HD, not just for me, but for the child inside me, the child whose life they were already willing to distort with lies, a life they'd shape around deception before it even began to form words. That night, as Ethan slid into bed beside me with some excuse about a late meeting, I realized a fundamental truth. I had given everything to people who saw me as nothing, a checkbook, a convenience, a fool. Every sacrifice, every compromise I made for them had been met not with gratitude, but greed. They hadn't just used me, they had erased me. You know what I was thinking? I said softly as he settled in beside me. He murmured, already turning away. What's that? I was thinking about how much I've sacrificed for this family, for everyone I love. He turned back slightly. What do you mean, just that? I gave up that job in Portland to stay close to my brother and his wife. I've supported Zoe through all her finding herself phases. I've been the rock everyone leans on. I paused, letting my words sink in. I just wonder, who would be my rock if I ever needed one? Ethan rolled over fully, then pulling me into his arms. I would, babe, I'll always be here for you. You know that? I nodded against his chest, feeling his heart beating steadily beneath my ear, the heart of a liar, the heart of a cheat, the heart of a man who had created a life with my niece. While we were trying to create our own, I know exactly who you are now, Ethan. I whispered too softly for him to hear. I had given this family everything, and they had discarded me like nothing. That night, as Ethan slept soundly beside me, I made a vow to myself and to the innocent child growing inside me. This would not be our story. We deserve better, and I was going to make sure we got it. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is how much preparation goes into a perfect meal. I didn't confront anyone, not my niece, not my husband, not my sister-in-law. Instead, I became the world's best actress and started gathering intelligence, like my life, depended on it in many ways. It did. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Financially, Ethan had always handled our investments and major financial decisions. I trusted him completely, focusing on my own career, while he built his consulting business with his father. I'm thinking of taking a more active role in our finances. I mentioned casually over breakfast one morning, maybe sitting in on your next meeting with the financial advisor. The flash of panic in his eyes was almost imperceptible. Why the sudden interest? I rubbed my growing belly. Motherhood, I guess, wanting to make sure everything's secure for the baby. He relaxed. Visibly, that's sweet but unnecessary. Everything's well managed. I smiled and changed the subject, but that afternoon I went to our bank and requested all statements from the past year. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Regular transfers to my brother and sister-in-law's account labeled as family support had increased over the past 6 months. The numbers didn't lie. Where affection had failed, accounting exposed the truth. There was a pattern of siphoning, of secrecy, of a man building safety nets for others while dismantling mine. There were also withdrawals of large cash amounts with no clear purpose. Next, I contacted a private investigator, not to follow Ethan. I already knew what he was doing and with whom, but to look into his father's consulting firm, where Ethan was a partner. Something had always seemed off about their sudden success 3 years ago when they landed several government contracts, while waiting for the PI's findings. I reconnected with an old law school friend, Diane, who had specialized in divorce law under the guise of getting advice for a friend. I learned everything I needed to know about protecting myself and my assets. Your friend should document everything, Diane advised over coffee, and I mean everything, dates, times, photos, financial records. The more evidence, the better position she'll be in. I nodded, taking mental notes. And what about shared business interests? Diane's eyebrow raised slightly. Those can get complicated, especially if there's questionable business practices involved. That sentence stayed with me, because I knew now, without doubt, everything about their success had been built on sand and secrets. 2 weeks later, the PI delivered his report. Ethan's father's company was indeed in trouble, serious trouble. They'd misrepresented credentials to obtain government contracts and were under investigation. One more push and the entire house of cards would collapse, which explained why my niece was being sent away with money we apparently didn't have. They were preparing for financial ruin and making contingency plans that didn't include me. But the most valuable information came from an unexpected source. My father-in-law's secretary, Margaret, she'd always had a soft spot for me and disapproved of how her boss conducted business over lunch, where I claimed I was surprising Ethan with an anniversary gift related to the company. She revealed that the business was secretly for sale at a fire sale price. They're desperate, she whispered. The investigation is further along than they're admitting. Your father-in-law is trying to sell before everything collapses. That night I called the one person I knew I could trust, my godmother. Eleanor, she'd been my mother's college roommate before their falling out years ago, a falling out I now suspected had something to do with my mother's moral flexibility. Eleanor had built a successful investment firm and had always told me to call if I ever needed anything. I'd never taken her up on it before I need to buy a company. I told her after explaining my situation without anyone knowing it's me behind the purchase. There was a long silence before Eleanor spoke. They've hurt you badly, haven't? No, I replied, my hand resting on my stomach. Then, let's make sure they find out, she said firmly. Over the next month, Eleanor created a shell company that made an offer for my father-in-law's business. Meanwhile, I opened separate bank accounts and began transferring portions of my savings, careful to leave our joint accounts appearing normal. I also discovered something that made everything fall into place. My niece had always been secretly in love with Ethan, even when we were dating in college. My old journals contained entries about her strange behavior around him, comments she'd made, ways she'd tried to undermine our relationship. I dismissed it then as harmless jealousy. Now I saw it for what it was, a decade-long obsession, and my sister-in-law had enabled it, encouraged it, even all those times she'd suggested. I was too focused on my career to be a good partner to Ethan, the subtle criticisms of my choices while praising Zoe's free spirit. The pointed comments about Ethan needing someone who put him first. They'd been laying groundwork for years. As Christmas approached, my plan crystallized. The family's annual Christmas Eve dinner, always held at my brother and sister-in-law's house, would be the perfect setting. By then I would be 6 months pregnant Zoe would be showing too much to hide it, and the sale of the company would be finalized. 1 week before Christmas, Eleanor called with the news. It's done. You now own 76% of Hayward Consulting. They don't know it's you. All they know is a private equity firm called Phoenix Rising has acquired controlling interest. I smiled at the name we'd chosen together, Phoenix Rising from the ashes. There was power in that name, a promise, a reminder that even from complete ruin, something strong and untouchable could be reborn just like me that same day. The PI delivered his final report, including surveillance, photos of Ethan and Zoe together, bank records, showing all the transfers, and most damning of all, recordings of phone calls between my sister-in-law and Ethan discussing the Arizona plan. The last piece fell into place when I visited my OB-GYN for my regular checkup. After confirming my baby girl was healthy and developing perfectly, I asked the question I'd been dreading, Dr. Hansen. Is it possible to determine paternity before birth for medical reasons? Of course, she said, looking at me carefully. Are you concerned about genetic issues? Yes, I lied. There's some family history I'm worried about. She explained the non-invasive prenatal paternity test, a simple blood draw, that could confirm paternity with 99% accuracy without any risk to the baby. 2 days before Christmas, the results arrived in my private email. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, hands shaking as I opened the attachment. The test confirmed what I had suspected, but feared to know for certain. Ethan was not the father of my baby. My breath caught, suspended in a moment that felt too still, too final. The kind of stillness that comes right before a storm or right after devastation. The world seemed to pause. I stared at the screen, the lines and numbers blurring as the weight of truth settled over me in a strange way. I felt lighter, freed. This child, my daughter, wasn't bound to Ethan's betrayal. She was wholly mine. The timing made sense. Those weeks when Ethan had been working late had coincided with a business trip I'd taken. During that trip, I'd reconnected with an old colleague, Thomas. Nothing had happened beyond one drunk kiss that I had immediately regretted and confessed to Ethan upon my return. He'd forgiven me instantly, too instantly. I now realized because he'd been sleeping with my niece, the irony was breathtaking. I had begged for his forgiveness over one kiss, cried in shame, while he had slipped between the sheets with someone I raised like a sister. Ethan had been so concerned about Zoe's pregnancy, never questioning his own paternity of the child. I carried he'd assumed my faithful devotion, while betraying me in the worst possible way. As I sat in that parking lot, something inside me hardened into resolve for months. I'd been gathering evidence, making plans, preparing for war, while pretending everything was normal. But in that moment, I felt a shift. I wasn't preparing for war anymore. I was preparing for liberation. I'd smiled through family dinners, while my niece carried my husband's child. I'd kissed Ethan goodnight, knowing he'd been with her hours earlier, but as I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling my daughter kick, I knew with absolute certainty Christmas Eve would be the last performance of my life, and it would be one hell of a finale. Not a breakdown, not a plea, but a reckoning. Long overdue and exquisitely designed Christmas Eve arrived with picture-perfect snow falling outside my brother and sister-in-law's colonial home. I'd spent hours getting ready. My hair, styled in soft waves, a form-fitting burgundy maternity dress that showcased my bump, subtle makeup that highlighted my eyes. If this was to be my final act in this family drama, I wanted to look my best. You look stunning, Ethan said as we pulled into the driveway. He leaned over to kiss my cheek, his hand resting briefly on my stomach. Everyone's going to be so excited to see you. He added, your sister-in-law, said Zoe's. Finally, back from her business trip, I smiled. I'm excited to see her too. It's been too long. The house was decorated, as it always was. My sister-in-law's perfect taste evident in every wreath, garland, and ornament. Christmas carols played softly in the background. As my brother took our coats and my sister-in-law hugged us both, her embrace stiffening slightly when she reached me. You're getting so big, she exclaimed, her eyes darting toward the staircase. Zoe's just freshening up. She'll be down in a minute. The dining room table was set with my grandmother's china crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier. My father-in-law and his wife arrived moments later, bringing expensive wine and forced cheer. I knew from Eleanor that the sale of their company had been finalized yesterday. They just didn't know who the new owner was yet. There's my favorite daughter-in-law. My father-in-law boomed, hugging me a little too enthusiastically. And my grandchild, how's the little one doing, growing strong? I replied, watching his face carefully. Just like family businesses, should a flicker of discomfort crossed his features before he masked it with another smile. When Zoe finally descended the stairs, you could have heard a pin drop. She wore a flowing black dress that almost, but not quite, concealed her pregnancy. Her eyes widened when she saw me, then quickly darted to Ethan, who had gone completely pale. Zoe. I moved forward to embrace her, feeling her stiffen in my arms. It's been ages, and look at you, you're positively glowing. My sister-in-law quickly intervened. Dinner's ready, everyone take your seats. The tension around the table was thick as my brother carved the turkey and plates were passed. I remained cheerful, asking Zoe about her business trip and watching her stumble through lies, while Ethan stared fixedly at his plate. My sister-in-law kept trying to change the subject, while my father-in-law drank too much wine too quickly. Perfect as dessert was being served, I stood up, champagne glass in hand. Everyone looked at me expectantly. I'd like to make a toast, I said, smiling at each face around the table, to family and to honesty. Uneasy glances were exchanged. You know, I've been reflecting a lot lately on what family means, on loyalty, on trust. I took a small sip of my sparkling water, and I've realized something. Important blood doesn't always mean loyalty. My sister-in-law's smile became fixed. Darling, perhaps this isn't the time for exactly the time, Aunt Melissa. I cut her off gently, because Christmas is about truth, isn't it? So here's some truth I know about Ethan and Zoe. The silence was deafening. Ethan half rose from his chair. Can we talk about this in private? Why? I asked, still smiling. There's nothing private about this betrayal. You've been sleeping with my niece for months. She's pregnant with your child. And my sister-in-law, I turned to her, watching the color drain from her face, has been facilitating the whole thing in exchange for monthly payments. My brother's fork clattered onto his plate. What is she talking about? Melissa. My sister-in-law's hands trembled. She's confused. The pregnancy hormones. I have the receipts, Aunt Melissa, literally. I reached into my purse and removed a folder, placing it calmly on the table. Bank statements showing transfers from our account to hers, phone records, text messages. Even some rather interesting recorded conversations about sending Zoe to Arizona to have her baby in secret. My father-in-law stood up abruptly. I think we should go, Ethan. This is a private family matter. Oh, I wouldn't leave just yet, Roger, I said pleasantly. Because the next part concerns you too. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I smiled. Phoenix Rising, does that name mean anything to you? The blood drained from his face so quickly. I thought he might faint. That's the company that bought us out, he stammered. Correction, that's my company. I let the words sink in. I'm your new boss. Roger and Ethan is too, assuming either of you still have jobs after the federal investigation into your fraudulent contract bids concludes. Ethan stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. You can't be serious. How could you possibly afford it? Let's just say I have friends in high places who recognize a good investment opportunity. Especially when said investment comes with enough documentation of fraud to either clean house and rebuild or let the company burn to the ground. I turned to my husband. Your choice, really. Zoe began to cry, her hands cradling her stomach. I never meant for this to happen. She sobbed. Yes, you did, I replied calmly. You've wanted Ethan since college, and Aunt Melissa helped you get him. Didn't she, just like she's helped you get everything you've ever wanted? My brother looked between my sister-in-law and niece, realization dawning on his face. Melissa? Is this true? My sister-in-law's composure finally cracked. She's always had everything: the perfect grades, the perfect career, the perfect husband. Zoe deserves something of her own, so you sold me out, I said quietly. Your own daughter. We were going to take care of you, Ethan interjected desperately. You would never have known, and that makes it better. I laughed, a sound empty of humor, that you were all going to continue lying to me for the rest of my life. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling my daughter kick as if in agreement. The betrayal was so complete, so thorough. It almost felt rehearsed, and in some twisted way, maybe it had been. Well, here's something none of you know. I continued this baby. Isn't Ethan's face contorted. What are you talking about? Of course, she's mine. I slid another piece of paper across the table. Paternity test says otherwise. Remember when I confessed to kissing Thomas during my Portland trip? Well, it was slightly more than a kiss, and while I regretted it immediately, it seems the universe has a sense of humor. The look of betrayal on Ethan's face almost made me laugh. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. He had played judge and executioner over my single moment of weakness while hiding months of infidelity with my niece. So here's what's going to happen, I said, standing up straight. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'll be taking control of Phoenix Rising and conducting a full audit of Hayward. Consulting anyone who wants to keep their job will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. I turned to my sister-in-law and brother. The monthly payments stop today. You'll need to figure out your financial problems on your own. Finally, I looked at my niece. As for you, Zoe, you're welcome to Ethan. You two deserve each other, but don't come looking for sympathy or support when he eventually does to you what he did to me. My voice didn't shake, my hands didn't tremble. I was done being their pawn. I gathered my purse and coat. The silence around the table was absolute. Merry Christmas. Everyone, I said, consider this my gift to you all, the truth. As I walked toward the door, my brother called out, "Wait, where are you going?" I turned back one last time, looking at the family that had betrayed me so completely. I'm going home, Uncle Daniel, to start over, to build a life where I'm valued, not exploited, where loyalty means something. I rested my hand protectively over my bump. My daughter deserves better than this family, and so do I. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click, muffling the chaos erupting inside. As I walked my car through the gently falling snow, I felt something I hadn't expected: peace. They had treated me like nothing, but I had become everything, not through vengeance, but through reclaiming the pieces of myself they'd tried to diminish. Spring came early that year as the cherry blossoms bloomed outside my new apartment windows. I sat in the nursery rocking chair holding my week-old daughter Lily, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, as she slept peaceful and perfect. The aftermath of my Christmas Eve revelation had been exactly as chaotic as I'd expected. The media got wind of the federal investigation into Hayward Consulting, and the story made local business headlines. My father-in-law ultimately took a plea deal, avoiding jail time, but paying substantial fines. Ethan, stripped of his partnership, had to start over at a much smaller firm. My divorce was finalized in record time, with Ethan too afraid of further scandal to contest any of my terms. The company, now truly mine, was being restructured under Eleanor's mentorship. We'd managed to salvage the legitimate parts of the business while discarding the fraudulent practices that had kept it afloat. Every decision I made for that company was now rooted in transparency, in building something worthy of my daughter's future. My brother had called dozens of times before I finally agreed to meet him over coffee. He tearfully explained that he'd had no idea about my sister-in-law's involvement. I believed him. My brother had always been somewhat oblivious to the manipulations happening around him. We were slowly rebuilding our relationship, though I kept firm boundaries. My sister-in-law and Zoe were different stories. Neither had contacted me directly, though. I heard through my brother that Zoe had moved into a small apartment, paid for by Ethan, who visited occasionally, but had already started dating someone else. Her baby, a boy, was due any day now. My sister-in-law, faced with the financial reality of losing her monthly stipend from Ethan, had been forced to sell her beloved vacation home and take a part-time job to supplement my brother's retirement income. It was ironic how justice didn't roar. It whispered, through consequences no one could avoid. It was poetic. Really, their new beginning bore not of grace, but of consequence. The humbling seemed to be doing her good. According to my brother, a gentle knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Thomas stood there, 2 cups of tea in hand. "Thought you might need this," he whispered, careful not to wake Lily. We'd reconnected properly. After my separation from Ethan, the guilt we both felt over our one-night indiscretion had evolved into honest conversations, then friendship, and eventually something deeper. He'd been there through my pregnancy, asking for nothing, offering everything. He had seen me at my lowest, broken, uncertain, afraid, and still he stayed, not because he had to, but because he chose to. That kind of quiet loyalty had become my anchor. In the darkest hours, when I questioned my worth, his presence whispered hope, like a lighthouse guiding a ship lost at sea. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, setting the tea down and kneeling beside the rocking chair. "We're perfect," I replied, watching as he gently stroked Lily's cheek with one finger. We weren't rushing into anything. Both of us had learned the hard way that solid foundations take time to build, but there was something undeniably right about his presence in our lives. Sometimes when I caught him, humming softly to Lily, or folding her onesies with more care than I thought possible, I felt an ache, not of regret, but of longing I'd never known possible. The longing to be seen, accepted, loved, without carrying baggage or pretense. A part of me ached, not from regret, but from the unfamiliar sting of being genuinely seen, loved. Without condition, my phone buzzed with an email notification. Eleanor, with an update on our latest acquisition, a struggling media company we were restructuring. "Business can wait," Thomas said, noticing my glance at the phone. "You're still supposed to be on maternity leave." "Boss lady," I smiled. "Old habits." The truth was, I loved my new role. Taking a company in distress and rebuilding it into something strong and ethical was deeply satisfying. Each success felt like further proof that I was more than what my family had tried to reduce me to. "I got a call from your niece yesterday," Thomas said carefully. My body tensed. Even after everything, her name still stirred something sharp in my chest. Not just pain, but a hollow kind of sorrow for the bond we destroyed. "What did she want to apologize?" "She asked if she could see you meet Lily." He watched my face closely. "I told her I'd pass along the message, but the decision was entirely yours." I looked down at my daughter, her face so peaceful in sleep. "How do you let someone back in after they've burned everything down? Maybe someday?" I said finally, "but not yet. She has to figure out her own life first without me, cleaning up her messes." Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd never pushed me to reconcile before I was ready. Later that night, with Lily asleep in her bassinet and Thomas dozing beside me, I thought about how differently everything had turned out from what I'd planned a year ago. I'd been living what I thought was the perfect life with a husband I believed loved me, surrounded by a family I trusted completely. The loss of those illusions had been devastating, but in their place, something stronger had grown: a life built on truth rather than convenience, relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. A daughter who would grow up knowing her mother was not someone who could be discarded or replaced. My phone lit up with a text from my brother: "Thinking of you and Lily tonight. Proud of the mother. You've become love, Uncle Daniel." I smiled and texted back, "Love. You too. Lunch next Sunday." Setting down my phone, I gazed out at the city lights twinkling below my window. The path forward wasn't completely clear yet, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to discover where it might lead. They had treated me like nothing, but I had rebuilt myself into everything I was meant to be, and that perhaps was the best revenge of all, dear friend. Life doesn't always give us fair choices. Sometimes it hands us broken trust, betrayal, and grief so deep it numbs the soul. But what defines us is not what we suffer, it's how we rise. The Stoics believed that we cannot control what happens to us, only how we respond, and in choosing dignity over revenge, clarity over chaos, truth over illusion, we reclaim our power. So if you've ever felt like nothing, I hope you remember, you are capable of becoming everything. Your scars aren't shameful, they are symbols of survival and strength with love. So the story is over, dear friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, then I know something in this story must have touched your heart. This journey, as devastating as it was, revealed something essential about healing and rebuilding. When betrayal comes from the ones closest to you, it doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your identity. But in that ruin, there is also space for rebirth. As Viktor Frankl once said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And she did just that. She didn't fight back with noise or vengeance. She chose quiet strategy, truth, and inner strength. She reclaimed her power, not by trying to punish others, but by refusing to let their betrayal define her. That's a lesson for all of us. The strongest kind of revenge is becoming everything they thought you could never be. To those of you still listening, whatever storm you're in right now, please know you're not alone. And you're not powerless. If you've ever felt discarded, like you were nothing, remember, you are the architect of your own rebuild. As Rumi once said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. Let this be your light. If this story stayed with you, if it moved something in your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Not for us, but so others who need healing might find their way too. With all my love, see you in the next story.